Okay, let's get started. It's time 10:05. Today is Tuesday, April 26, 2022. I call to order the Fort Bend County Election Commission's meeting. And at this point, I will pass it on to Olga. Please go ahead with the roll call.
Thank you, Judge. KP George,
Yes.
Carmen Turner, Laura Richard,
Present.
Cynthia Ginyard, Linda Howell.
Okay, let's move on. And at this point, I will ask. And also, I just wanted to say, for the purpose of the minutes, let it be recorded that Mrs. Linda Howell will be represented this meeting as the Republican Party chair, because accidentally we didn't know, or somehow we didn't know all the formalities of the June, the power transfer and all we posted, but we checked with our county attorney's office, and they said we need to correct it, and so make that correction. Instead of Bobby Eberly, Linda Howell will be representing Republican Party as party chair in this meeting. And at this point, item number 2 is, you wanted to read? Go ahead.
Number 2, approve minutes of meeting held on December 2nd, 2021.
Motion to approve.
Okay, so any discussion about it? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
All in favor? And motion passes 3-0. And then we will move it to next item.
Number 3, review and analyze the Fort Bend County 2022 primary election cycle and administration and take all appropriate action.
Okay. So basically for this discussion, we started this exercise just to get, everybody to know what is going on and how we are prepared and how we are going to be, continue to prepare our county to be one of the beacon when it comes to state of Texas, as far as giving an opportunity for people to vote and exercise their right, constitutional right. And so far as a county, I believe we have done an amazing job. And we have today, I will invite, first of all, our election administrator, John Odom, to come and give a report on your experience and what went on. And then I will ask, is Robin here? Then I will ask Robin to come. Please, sir, please go ahead.
Thank you, Judge George. Obviously, we've completed a primary. Everything went we feel very successfully. We had a 17.5% turnout, which was above the state average. We had actually more people vote on Election Day than did in the last presidential, but that's happened several times since then. Early voting went pretty smooth. We've implemented, let me introduce our new, 3 months into the job, Assistant Elections Administrator, Chase Wilson. Chase has done some innovative things in our office.
If you don't mind, Chase, would you please stand up and, okay. It's important to know who you are, and thank you for agreeing to come on that position, because it is one of the most important positions to help and support John. Please go ahead, John.
Chase has implemented several things good, and he's has a great grasp of technology, and he implemented a log program that we're using. Anybody who calls in for anything during early voting or Election Day, from one of our sites, we log it. Each one of our staff members has their own sheet, and then they flow to a cumulative dashboard. During the early voting period, we only had 62 support calls from our, I believe it was 24 sites. Most of those were user error. They forgot how to turn things on, or they, forget how to cancel a voter, because we did have lots of cancellations and more people voting provisionally than probably ever before due to the issues with ballot by mail, which was a huge problem for us. But going back to the issues, most of the things were, out of those 62 calls, 43 were user error, 42 were, I'm sorry, can't see, had my eyes doctored 2 times and now I still can't see again. 2 were technical, or 32 were technical. These were varied with things like, one of the things we saw in the early voting in the primary, because turnout the first week was so slow that equipment times out, the voting booths, the express votes. And we didn't know what to expect, so we set up plenty of equipment. And people tend to go to maybe the first 4 in line, so that the last 8 maybe never get used. And so when somebody goes down there after it's sat idle for 8 hours, it may come up with a blue screen, not really a blue screen, but a circle on it where it's actually timed out. So we had to instruct our judges to periodically go watch these things and, either take them down or the solution's pretty simple. You just simply reboot it. And that's really not necessary if they're not busy, and they never were until the last day. Unfortunately, we had a few sites that had as many voters in the last 2 hours as they've had all week. So we did wind up with lines at Cinco Ranch, at Greatwood, at Tompkins in the last, from at 8 o'clock, 7 o'clock on the last night of early voting. There's really nothing we can do about that. But again, most of our calls were user error, issues related to canceling voters, canceling ballot by mail. We had 18 calls related to the kiosks, to the electronic poll books, but none related to Bluetooth. The other ones were all related to internet connectivity through the hotspot, or through, they didn't know how to plug the printer on, a number of issues, but nothing that was related to Bluetooth. On election day, we did have one that was Bluetooth related, and I'm not really sure what that was. I just look at the stats and it says that. So, and that really, we've had none of that since the November 2020 election. On election day, we had 105 calls. Again, 63% of those were user error or user problems. 10% were we can't find something in our cabinet. We can't find our timesheet, that type of thing. 35, a total of 35 out of 78 sites, or 33% of the calls were technical related, and 20% came out of 2 sites. We did have an issue at one of our early election day sites. It got open by 7, but they really weren't voting people. I think they voted 2 people in the first hour. We had an IT tech on site when they opened. They couldn't resolve the problems they were having, which was largely user error. The poll worker there simply could not handle the responsibilities. And again, these are, it's easier, you say, why don't you replace them? That's easier said than done, because we don't necessarily pick these judges. The parties send them to us. So in this case, this was a really smart guy, good guy, but he just had problems with all kinds of things. And but anyway, we had a very successful election day. As things go, we now, under some of the things in Senate Bill 1, and I'll come back to that in a minute, but we're now required on election night to post what's called a reconciliation log. It is a preliminary one because we don't have all the ballots in, but we did that at about 1 in the morning. We also, we did that about 1 in the morning because, again, we had a site that failed to bring the right stuff into us. It seems to be a habit with that particular site, but again, the judge is a party chair, and so a precinct chair rather, and so they're hard to replace. But I think this is the 3rd election in a row they've left something important behind, and then we have to get it retrieved in the evening. We do a final reconciliation after our early vote, after our late absentees, and after our provisionals are counted. Out of We checked in 88,213 voters. We counted 8 fewer voter ballots than that, which we think is pretty remarkable. That means we had 8 people who walked away or just chose not to vote and didn't surrender their ballot. You can compare that to Harris County that had over 1,500. Dallas County had 40 more votes than they did check-ins. So we're now required to post this on our website, and it's there. And I went to, last week, to about the dozen largest counties. Some didn't have it there, but of the ones that did, we had the lowest percentage of, had a highest percentage of votes cast as opposed to people checking in of any county that I saw among the 12 largest. So we're happy with that. We had, among our election day sites, we had turnout vary from 43 to Cinco Ranch. There's about 1,700, I remember, if I remember right. But one of the things that we've seen since we've been in the early voting program, or not the early voting, in the countywide polling place program, is that people tend to gravitate to our early voting sites. And there's reasons for that. We try to be consistent with them. We use the same sites over and over again, and one of them is not Commonwealth, although I would be happy to use it. Of our 15 biggest site turnout, 14 of them, on Election Day, 14 of them were early voting. Those 14 sites comprised about 65% of our Election Day turnout. So we've got sites like Living Word Lutheran and Cinco Ranch that had a few hundred people vote, and then a mile down the road you have Cinco Library, which has 1,700. And you can't get those people to go somewhere else. And it's getting worse and worse every election cycle, I think, because they've been voting there for 10 years now. They vote there early, so they ask their spouse, where can I go vote? Well, I voted at Cinco, so we always vote at Cinco, so go there. So that's a problem we're facing. We can ramp Cinco up because we have a huge facility there. We can put as many as 40 voting stations in there, but the parking lot's inadequate. It wasn't too bad during the pandemic because the libraries were closed, but now they're not. We also have issues with shoppers and students parking in that parking lot, so we really don't have enough parking at that site. But it's a great site otherwise.
So, John, can I ask you a question? Is there any way we can maybe reserve some parking because voters are now going to take a long time, right?
No, well, it varies. That was one of the problems, and I'm very, I tell Grady over and over again, I'm so glad you wanted this voting system instead of the one that I was inclined to go with. They both do the same thing, but for example, I had somebody in Harris County tell me it took 22 minutes to vote. Wow. Somebody else who actually used to be the director of elections over there told me he had to go through 104 screens to vote. When we were looking at that particular system, they told me that they could only do one contest per page, but by the time we bought it or used it, they could do multiple. They still can't. We can put multiple contests on a screen. So, we maybe have our voters go through 20 screens as opposed to 100. That's a recipe for failure for Harris County and any large county that can't get that thing going faster. And then you add in 2 ballot sheets, and people putting both ballots into at the same time, you get jammed. So every time I tell Grady more than once, and Andy too, thank you for pushing for this particular system because it's been good and the support's been incredible. But again, we see this going forward with our sites. We've always needed more early voting sites in what used to be Precinct 3, now is Precinct 1. And there's reasons for that. The growth is phenomenal. Where I used to live, we moved because of the construction behind us, but now there's over 2,000 houses just directly behind where we used to live when it used to be a cow pasture. And that happened in 2 years. I'm talking about Harvest Green. We've seen this throughout the county. We've, in past years, up in Cinco Ranch, taken a polling. We're supposed to divide precincts when they get to be 5,000. We did not do this during redistricting because we simply didn't have time. But we've taken precincts up there before that were to 7,500, done it on a statutory basis in May, split them into 3, and by January, when it goes into effect, all 3 of them were well above 5,000. So the growth is amazing. It's hard to keep up with. But it's also overruns resources. And in these new areas of the county, you don't have traditional facilities like Knights of Columbus or American Legion or Moose Club or whatever, which are usually happy to hold voting. Churches can be great, except churches aren't very good for Saturday voting. Clubhouses are terrible for early voting in a May election because most of them don't want to hold it. Like, for example, a country club or clubhouses, because the membership wants to have graduation parties, so on and so forth, Mother's Day events, those types of things. So we compete with that. So we lose a lot of facilities in our May elections, particularly in the primary runoff. We have a number that we won't have. But those are just some challenges. But we still need, and now what is Precinct 1, more early voting, because that's where we're slammed. In the last presidential, our 3 biggest early voting sites, and one of them had only been used that time, never again, were all in Precinct 3. So we need more early voting up there, and it's very difficult to find.
John, can I ask you a question? I did talk to Commissioner Morales, and he said he will be, communicating with some of the HOAs and
Yeah.
other entities there. Have you had any conversation with the commissioner?
Not since he's been up there. He helped us when he was in Precinct 1, obtain some new sites, which we lost because.
Yeah, we're talking about the previous. I'm talking about Fulshire, Katy area,
Right,
because we
right.
always have a challenge.
Right. It's a challenge there, and we don't like to be in grade schools because grade schools have no parking. But Katy ISD will not let us vote in they're on shaky legal ground, but you don't want to go where you're not wanted. In an election, in a elementary or middle school, they will, in junior highs and high schools, and they're very, beside from that, they're very easy to work with. They're very accommodating. I have no complaints with them, and so is Lamar, and so is Fort Bend ISD. But the fact of the matter, in Fulshire, in 3 elections, will be in 3 different early voting sites up there, which is confusing to the voter. And partly of that was we were in one school and then had to move to, it was unavailable due to testing, and then we had to move back to Irene Stern, which the city uses for other purposes, but it was their election, so it was either let us use Irene Stern or you won't have early voting in Fulshire. So they did, and now we're back to another school for the primary runoff. So that's not what we want to do. We want to keep people voting at the same place every time, and not necessarily growing like they are, but it is. When we first did the polling place program, which you remember, I asked you to be a member of that committee. One of my concerns was I was tired. I didn't like seeing people have to chase a polling place from election to election because they were different for school elections than they were for other elections. And once we went into this program, we pretty much consolidated everybody into us doing their elections. Now, the big exception to that is Katy ISD, which they're in 3 counties, so I can understand that. At one point in time, they'd ask us if we could do the whole thing. We couldn't. We could now, but not in a constitutional amendment election. But they've since bought their own equipment, and they do their own coding, and they do their own ballot by mail. Sure. We've had a couple of MUDs, which we did contracts for, but the contracts have gotten a little bit expensive because early voting costs have gone up considerably in the last 3 or 4 years.
John, can I ask you a question?
Yes.
Sorry to interrupt you. Let's just real quick switch gear a little bit about, especially the ballot by mail. You had some challenges due to the new election laws, but you did an amazing job in curing a lot of those deficient.
We didn't cure as many as we would have liked. The first couple of weeks of early voting, we had a really high number. The first couple of weeks of the year, we had a high number of rejected applications. That went down considerably. It started out at about 60%, it fell very rapidly as unfortunately, we didn't even see this application until a few days before Christmas. So therefore, our vendors couldn't see it. The state didn't put it out. We didn't get it on our website till January 3rd. Although only a handful of people submitted the wrong one. We saw that fall off considerably as word got out through communication, word of mouth, and the parties particularly educating people. So it dropped down to, toward the end of the period, we were looking at about a 15% rejection on applications. Now, we mailed out, if I remember right, about 5,500 ballots. Initially, we had about 800 rejected because they didn't put in the correct information. We got that down, that cure rate down to, I think we wound up rejecting a little over 500 or maybe slightly under 500, which you don't want to reject any. That's far more than we've ever done before. But we started returning these by mail as soon as they came in. We're allowed to open that flap that shows us not where the ballot is, but where the numbers are written in order to inform the voter of their problem. So we got some of it down that way. As soon as the ballot board convened, we had them calling voters every night until 8 p.m. So we had probably 5 phone lines going every night till 8, telling people what their options were, that they could either come in and fix it in person. They could ask us to return it to them, and they fix it. But by that point in time, the time was getting short. They could go on to the state ballot tracker and add that information to the records. And unfortunately, we did not know, nor did hardly anybody know that that is an option available early on, not from the ballot tracker, but simply what we were told initially by the state was that if the number they put down didn't match our records, that it was to be rejected, and so they were. Probably second week of February, we found out that we could go into the team system and see if they had more than one number recorded there, and if they did, we could add that number to our records and reject it. So that brought some of the rejections down, but nobody knew that initially. We also, the ballot tracker was not working until probably the second day of the early voting period. So now our ballot tracker was working fine, but you can't make that update there. This is the state ballot tracker. So the people would go in there and they would say, well, I tried and it doesn't work, or it won't let me in, or say it's not found. So that got fixed, but it was probably just a couple of weeks before the election. But through a variety of efforts, they got this down, and voters were given basically a week to get this stuff fixed. It should have been the Tuesday after the election, but because Tuesday was some state holiday, it was actually moved to a Wednesday. So we did have people fix this stuff in that period of time and got it down. Now, what we're seeing in this election, we've mailed out more ballots than we did in the primary, mostly because nearly everybody who votes by mail is a senior citizen and they do an annual application. So instead of starting from 0, we start with a base of 5,500. So we've mailed out over 6,000. We're seeing very few. The first day or two we saw, the first day we got them back, we saw some issues, but since then it's dropped down pretty low, probably under 10%.
Thank you.
And I think we don't know, we've not really started looking at the stuff from the primary runoff yet.
Yeah, actually, what I will ask is anybody, members, have any question? Otherwise, I will ask Robin to give her Information Technology Director to give a brief report on what she noticed. Then we will, of course, we have to get ready for Commissioners Court meeting, so we can find out. Any question from the members? Yeah. So please
Okay,
let me call Robin.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. Appreciate it, John.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Are you requesting an update from the previous election or moving forward to the current election, or both?
Basically, we are here to get a report on the primary election.
Okay. So as John
Your
mentioned,
engagement part of it, of course. John talk about his
Absolutely.
report.
so as John mentioned, he gave an update regarding the last election. IT was not involved in providing primary support. The Elections Administration Office provided that. If they needed additional support, then we were available on call. We had an assigned tech to elections, and on election day, we did have individuals that were roaming out to different sites for all of the different, for election day only. And for the upcoming one, didn't realize I wasn't on there. Yeah, actually, for the last election, we started doing live streaming, similar to what we have in Commissioner's Court. So that for this election is officially on. It was turned on last Thursday, the 24th, and it will be on continuously through June, through mid-June. Our plan for the current election, early voting has already started. We have a tech that is on standby. He will receive forwarded emails from the Elections Administration in case there is any need for support. Additionally, we have 4 techs that are going to be running routes on Saturday, May 7th, and those techs will be available to triage support, provide any technology support that may be needed. Additionally, we have 2 IT security team members that are going to be processing thumb drives. This is something that we typically do at the end of the election night. Following that up, and I have to clarify with John, but it looks like he's requested a paperless solution for providing access to sample ballots, election notifications, and cancellation notifications at all voting locations in May 2023. So we have some time. That's nothing I think that we need to discuss today unless you prefer to.
Sure. And especially this election and also the runoff elections are pretty light turnout elections. Like maybe this is help us to prepare better for the November election.
Yes.
And so I'm glad to see that, the primary election had less issues with chaoses and, all that stuff. I'm very excited to see that. So any question for any of the members? And Robin, I appreciate your help.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And this is at this point, I will open it up if any of the members have any question to either John for the election part of it or the technology support from the Robin side. If any questions, welcome to ask. And thank you for being here. Appreciate it. And we will, time to time, we will do this so that we can have a conversation to make our election system better. So thank you for being here. Appreciate it. With that, do you have anything? With that, do I have a motion to adjourn?
No, we need to go to the next number.
Eh?
We need to move to number 4.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Number 4 has been pulled.
Yeah, number 4 has been pulled, and that leads us to
Number 5.
Number 5. Of course, there is no
No
there is no
action.
number 5, and number 6 is adjourning. And if I have a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Okay, with no objection, this election commission meeting is now adjourned. Thank you for the participation.